Okay, we're going to get started. Thank you everyone for coming today. This is pretty amazing seeing all these faces. Before I get started, just interested in a show of hands, if you ever played pickup baseball on this field. Wow.
I think everybody.
I don't know about all of you who just raised your hands, but this park and those games bring back incredible memories for me. And they brought back amazing memories for Howard, and Howard and I actually talked about this park and those games pretty often. And actually, it's kind of ironic that we're having this here because Howard and I actually would argue about the games at this field. And the argument was, I was an okay athlete. You be quiet, Ira. I was an okay athlete. But when we played here, it was self-hitting. So you wouldn't have pitchers like Norm and Laz or Fid throwing the ball at you. And I owned the games at this park. You guys might not remember this, but I was a rock star. You don't remember that? So whenever Howard and I would talk about this, Howard would say, you know what? I don't even remember you playing. And I said, you know what, Howard? I don't remember who won the Stanley Cup in '94. The Rangers, the New York Rangers won the Stanley Cup in '94. Almost always we would play the games, the baseball games here in the springtime. And Howard and I loved spring in Scarsdale. We would talk about a lot of the experiences we had, and most of the fun that we seemed to have was in spring. And just a few of the memories, baseball card opening day. So the first day baseball cards were sold at Toy and Party, a bunch of us would show up, we'd buy the baseball cards, and we'd sit all over the place on the sidewalk flipping. An incredible memory. The picnic behind Quaker Ridge every spring, except the spring that I think Robert Kennedy was assassinated. Wiffle ball in Howard's backyard. How many people played wiffle ball in Howard's backyard? Unbelievable. The Good Humor truck. Howard and I used to love that Good Humor truck that parked right in the back of Quaker Ridge every day during the spring. And who could forget Kick the Can at Blummy's? Blummy, do you remember Kick the Can at Blummy's? I was actually talking to Fid about that the other day, and we both were wondering if the name of the game was Kick the Can or Kick the Can at Blummy's. We didn't know what the official name was.
Doesn't matter, you weren't a factor in that either.
Okay, this isn't an audience participation event, actually. I think that Howard's and my love for spring and our love for being able to play any time of the year and not have to worry about thunder and lightning, rain, was largely why we decided to move to California back right after college. In August, in La Jolla, where Howard lived, we had a memorial for him. And the memorial was for Howard. I'd like to think that today's time together is about Howie, as we knew him when he was young. For me, today is about Howie, not Howard. Some of you may recall, we did call him Howie when we were younger. Bill Grober called me the other day when I told him that today we were going to talk about Howie, and he said, I never called him Howie, what are you talking about? But I think many of us who still have memories, Bill, do remember him being Howie. And for those of you who didn't keep track of Howard, he actually, in his, I think, freshman year of college, he decided he no longer wanted to be called Howie, so he wanted to be called Howard. And as I said, I like to think of him as the incredibly happy kid he was as Howie. Brooksy, where's Brooksy? Brooksy, a great friend of Howard's from Vanderbilt, was telling me, and I didn't even realize this, that jokingly he would refer to Howard as Ferris, because Howard really was very much like Ferris Bueller. His life was really, he led a charmed life. For 43 years he led a charmed life. And he knew it, and he appreciated it also. If I were to have asked Howard the happiest time in his life, when was it, and who was a part of it, he would have said his childhood, and many of you would have been the people that he would have talked about. So this is a pretty special occasion. Howard loved being a child, and he actually was one in so many great ways the rest of his life. He had such a childlike exuberance, and I think all of you who knew him really well felt that exuberance whenever you saw him, whenever you talked to him. He was excited, he was passionate about something. And he loved playing and having fun, and I really do believe that was at the center of our relationship, was that we always had fun, even the last 10 years when Howard was really suffering so much. The last time I saw Howard, he had a very rough day, but there was about an hour and a half where we had a great time. So we were always able to have fun together. And because Howard really was like a child, he was able to tutor children so naturally, so easily, because he was just being Howard when he was with them. And they knew that and they felt that. Many of you kept in touch with Howard over the years, but I know a lot of you who are here did not keep in touch with him, so I wanted to bring you all up to speed on Howard and his life. And I'll try to do this pretty quickly before the rain comes. After Scarsdale, Howard went to Vanderbilt University, and to be honest with you, he wasn't crazy about Vanderbilt. It was okay. He continued to excel in soccer and played for 4 years and did real well there. And he made a great lifelong friend in Brooksy, who I mentioned earlier. When Brooksy was wondering whether or not he should come to this today, because he said, who am I going to know besides you and Win and Drin? I said, look, Brooksy, you've heard all the stories that are going to be told. If you haven't heard some of them, you'll enjoy hearing some of them. And Brooksy pretty much knows everyone's nickname who's actually sitting here. So you can put some names with some faces, or nicknames with some faces. After our freshman year of college, Howard, Michael Wallach, where's Michael? Michael Wallach and I drove cross country, and we took about, 8 weeks. And it was an amazing experience. And when we were in California, we stayed with Michael's cousin up in Palos Verdes. And one day, we went to Manhattan Beach. And I don't know how many of you have ever been to Manhattan Beach, but there's a pier there. And Howard and I were tossing a football around on the beach, and we were talking at the pier. And we said, you know what? This would not be such a bad place to live. And ended up being a place where Laz actually moved out and joined us after a couple of years being there. And my family and I have lived in Manhattan Beach for the last 19 years. So, Manhattan Beach, very special. After graduating then, we decided we were actually going to take up our lives and move to California. And as I said before, so we could play year-round, actually outside. We drove in separate cars, and what we would do is, every 200 miles or so, because we were bored, we'd stop and throw a baseball around. And we used to play a game called Errors. Remember the game Errors, Grove? Yep. And the way you played Errors was you threw the hard ball and you tried to throw it so hard that the other guy would make an error. And so we do this every 200 miles or so, and we're in the middle of the desert in Arizona at a place called, where was it here? Meteor Crater. I don't know if any of you ever heard of this. Meteor Crater. We're throwing the ball around. Howard throws me a grounder in what he would later refer to as a routine grounder. There was nothing routine about this grounder. Takes a weird hop, hits my tooth, and knocks the center tooth in my mouth out. Oh. Okay, so here I am, toothless. And we have a decision to make. We can either go north to Las Vegas, or we can get to Los Angeles and get my tooth fixed. Guess what we did? We go to Las Vegas, and all I remember, Howard and I played poker one time while we were there, and a guy turns to me, and I'm sitting there betting, and I'm lisping because I don't have this front tooth. And the guy goes, so what part of Arkansas are you from? So anyway, we lose money and we eventually get to LA. And we're trying to find jobs while we're interviewing for real jobs. And I think a low point, some of you might think was a high point, was when Howard and I both walked into Arby's and they said, sorry, we're not interested in hiring you. Those good college educations, I'll tell you, catching up to us. But we both ended up working at a deli. And I got the job first, and we were working at a takeout counter. And Howard said he wanted the job too, so I had to train him. That was fun. And I trained Howard, and it was hysterical watching Howard actually interact with the customers when they'd come in. Because if they'd order something that Howard didn't like, he would try to talk them out of it. He'd go, "You don't want tongue? Look at this thing. Come on, who wants to eat that?" So he didn't really last long in that job. We took many trips, frequent trips to Vegas. Our friends used to joke that we'd go whenever we ran out of toothpaste. We'd go whenever we didn't run out of toothpaste, too. And after about a year, we lived together for a year, and then we lived in separate apartments. And Howard lived around the corner from me, down the hill and just around the corner. One night I was over at his house. We were watching TV. The show was over. I go back to my apartment, and about 10 minutes later, he calls me, and he says, "Hey, Peter, you got to come over. I burnt the toast." I go, "You burnt the toast? I need to come over to see this? You burn the toast all the time." He goes, "Just come over. I burnt the toast." So I go, "Howard, it's 11 o'clock. Some of us like to go to sleep at night." Howard was not a night. He was a night person. He was up until 4 or 5 a.m. So anyway, I walk down there. I turn the corner, and there are fire engines everywhere. I walk over to what was Howard's apartment before he burnt the toast. Howard actually, the toaster had caught fire, and his apartment building had burnt down. And the funny part about this story, besides the fact that Howard burnt down his apartment from burning toast, was that his toaster would catch fire every time I was over there. And he said, "What's the problem?" He goes, "Maybe the paper towels will catch fire, but what could happen?" So anyway, he burnt down the toast, the house, and the toast, and the insurance company. He did okay with the insurance company. Never really caught up to him. A couple of years later, Laz moved out. We had a great house about a half a block up from the ocean that we shared, and amazing memories. We'd sit on the rooftop and talk about everything. We set up a miniature golf course from the house to the ocean. We'd run on the beach at midnight. It was an amazing place to live. It really was incredible. And while we were there, I don't know how many of you know this, but Howard was actually in the Guinness Book of World Records. For juggling and running, I'm not sure the exact distance. Brooks, you know the exact distance? 5K. 5K. So he said to me, "I just want to be the best at something in the world." And I think the guy broke his record like the next week, but he said, I was the best for a week. And while we lived in that house, Howard also met what really was the love of his life. And this woman and he never got together and got married, which was a shame because they were very special. Howard had a couple of different jobs during that time. He worked for Jerry Buss, for those of you who know the Lakers, owns the Lakers. Howard worked for his real estate company at the LA Forum. Then he went on and worked at Mattel for a few years. But to say Howard was not a corporate guy is putting it lightly. He hated wearing a tie and jacket. He hated getting up in the morning. And he hated corporate life. And to kind of encapsulate how much he hated corporate life, what he was most proud of when he worked at Mattel, and this is true, was that he perfected the art of sleeping with his eyes open at his desk. He'd show it to me and I'd go, "You know what, you do like to sleep." In '93, he moved to La Jolla, and it was funny because I lived up in Century City at the time with my wife and our baby, and Howard lived in Manhattan Beach, and we needed to move. But there was no way we were moving to Manhattan Beach while Howard was still there. So Howard moves to La Jolla because my wife knew that she wouldn't see me much. So Howard moves to La Jolla. 2 months later, we moved to Manhattan Beach. And Howard really loved La Jolla. It's an amazing place if you've never been there. And when he was there, he started up an incredibly successful tutoring business. I said before, he was very gifted with children. And he started this tutoring business, and he tutored extremely wealthy people's children, very well-known people's children, Dick Enberg's kids, all of Dick Enberg's kids, Jeff Morad, the owner of the Padres. At the get-together we had a couple of months ago in La Jolla, I met Karen Noble of Barnes & Noble. So he was tutoring these amazing people's children, and he connected with them, and they really loved him for it. And the time that we spent together in La Jolla, you could tell what he meant to these people's lives. I'm very proud of what he built down there. Many of you have actually come up to me and commented on the blog that was set up for Howard, and all the comments that his students and the parents wrote about him and what he meant to them. And he loved his condo. He had a terrific condo where you could see the ocean from every window, and it was a very special place for him. And even though our lives went in very separate directions, I have a family with 4 children, live up in Los Angeles. I was a corporate guy. I traveled a lot. Our friendship stayed together, and we actually became even closer during these last 10 horrific years. Howard and I could talk about everything and anything, and he loved to talk. He loved to talk. He loved to listen. He loved to think. He loved people who had thoughts. And we talked about philosophy. We talked sports, relationships, kids, whatever. And as I said before, he loved having fun. He invented fun, and so we had a lot of it. I have even more to say about Howie than I'm going to save for the end. I want to talk a little bit more about our friendship, but I want to save some time for the other people who I'm going to bring up here today. And it really is an amazing list. Before I bring the first person up, I do want to thank Fid and Toes for pulling this together. This is an amazing event. Actually, Fid asked me about a month and a half ago, did Howard have any favorite music? Well, Howard had a favorite everything. And when he found something that he liked, he didn't waver. So he didn't really like any team besides the Rangers. And he really didn't like any other music besides Neil Young. So you'll be hearing a little Neil Young today. I actually asked a good friend of ours, why did he like Neil Young so much? And he said, because Neil Young, everything that Neil Young thought, the philosophies on life that he expresses in his music, Howard agreed with it all. And Howard loved people who agreed with him. And so he chose a good guy. Neil Young's been around for, 50 years, something like that. So that was cool. And that's what you're going to be hearing some of his songs between speakers. As I was looking at the speaker list today, and it's going to be Fid, Toes, Munns, Grobe, Tibbs, Norm, and Jim. First of all, some of these people actually have real names. Many of them actually got their nicknames from Howard. But I'm looking at this list and I'm realizing a lot of these guys were actually best friends with Howard at some point in his life. And I think that's pretty special. So let's first bring up Fid. Fid, come on up.